Hello, I want to take a moment to talk about reasons for evaluating. There's some very good points brought forward in our text. And one thing that I really want to point out is when you're accepted, trusted, respected, and needed, lots and lots of wonderful things happen. And that doesn't happen through anything except for relationship building within the organization. It can be within your training organization, but all the organizations that are stakeholders within your training, because as training, your success helps the success of all the other organizations. So they want you to succeed, and when you do, and they start to accept, trust, and respect, there are a lot of benefits to that. Now, if you don't fall into that category, things can be very difficult as well. I've seen lots of training organizations and teams simply get decimated through layoffs, things like that as well, because they weren't effective. They didn't build the relationships. They were simply there to do whatever they had to do, and they didn't take the time to go in and do the analysis and things like that that we're talking about. And specifically, they didn't take the time to evaluate whether their training worked or not. Now here Kirkpatrick gives three specific reasons on why we should evaluate training, and I want to add a couple more. Here are his three reasons. But a few more is if you're in a manufacturing environment or an environment that needs to create a profit or have something directly affect the bottom line, that's what everybody's going to look at. They're going to look at your ability as a training organization, developer, whatever position you hold, they're going to look at your ability to affect that bottom line. So when it comes to training and evaluation, you want to make very sure that everything you do has a huge purpose. Everything that you do for evaluation is linked up with your organization and their mission, vision, and values. Because when you're aligned with your organization, that's when you become, as we talked about on the first part, that's when you become needed. That's when you become embedded within the organization and more effective. So your purpose for evaluation should always fall back into the organization on how it's affecting the organization. Now here we're talking about the most common reasons for evaluating training. Now one thing that I always have to input is the learner is the number one focus for when we're building the training, but as far as the effectiveness of the training program, we have to factor in the organization. Why is this training needed? Why does the organization require training? That's how we start building those relationships with the other organizations and become needed, and all the other factors that we talked about earlier. So if all we think about are the learner needs, then we're just meeting part of the story. Learner-centered design and learner-centered teaching are absolutely paramount, but we have to remember prior to getting to that point, we have to look at those organizational needs, because that's what's actually driving the training. Once the training is built, then we look at the learner needs. So always remember, because when you factor in the organizational needs as well as the learner needs, then you're hitting the mark with multiple stakeholders, and that's what we want to do. Because if you just think about either the learner or just the organization, then you're going to miss the point of the entire training program, because it'll feel empty at some point. Some people will like it, some people won't, and those sorts of things will happen. And then he also talks about the facilities and everything like that here, and those are definitely questions that need to happen. But what needs to happen first and foremost in our evaluation is it delivering to the organization what we need? If it's not, then you go in and you look at facilities, you look at tools, tooling, content, everything else like that. And in terms of evaluation, quite often people only use, just like what Kirkpatrick says, they only use smile sheets. And the reason why, well, there's plenty of reasons. He gives a few here. They don't consider it important or urgent. They don't really know how to do it. And that's true with a lot of training organizations. No pressure from higher management. So what that does is that gives us as a training organization, a designer, a leader, whatever position or role that we hold, it gives us an amazing opportunity. Because imagine if we can show exactly how our training correlates or affects the organizational needs. And that is where you start getting into ROI, because we want to go deeper. The smile sheets are never going to give us anything to do with ROI, but as we go through our next few weeks, we're going to look deeper and deeper in how our training affects the bottom line and how to show that, because it's very important that we can speak to that clearly, succinctly, and show it with metrics and things like that, because that's the bottom line of what's going to keep your training organization thriving or contracting. So my goal here was to offer a different perspective that complements and goes along with, as well as gives a slightly different perspective from what we're learning in our text. So I hope I've accomplished that. But whatever we do, no matter what model you use or anything else, just make sure this one thing happens. Make sure that your training evaluation has purpose, and make sure that purpose is clearly defined, because when we can clearly define the purpose, we can speak to it easier, and that's how we develop those relationships and become needed as a training organization.